Steve, there's been some talk about if they can't reach any sort of deal between the two sides, that perhaps the president would say that the 14th Amendment precludes him from enforcing the debt ceiling, that the debt ceiling, in fact, is unconstitutional. I think it's fair to say you're a skeptic of that argument. What do you think?
Yeah, so just to remind folks, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution says essentially that the validity of the public debt of the United States, comma, authorized by law, shall not be questioned. And so the question is, what does that mean? We can't question the validity of the debt. And many people who refer to this, they leave out the section that says authorized by law. Because in my mind, what that says is that the debt limit is a law that authorizes the amount of money the government can borrow. And so if you were to exceed the debt limit, the argument is, well, you can't question the validity of that debt. Well, the problem is any debt above the debt limit is not authorized, because by definition, that's what the debt limit does. It authorizes a specific amount of debt. And so if you exceed that amount, you now have unauthorized debt. And in my mind, you can question the validity of that because it wasn't authorized. And so, I mean, it really doesn't help the president. I mean, were he to invoke the 14th Amendment, because there is clearly uncertainty about whether that debt would be valid or not, people would be questioning the validity of it. There would be a lawsuit. The investors would say, okay, I bought some debt. Is it valid? Will I get it repaid? How much interest am I going to charge to lend this extra money? So, in my mind, invoking the 14th Amendment does not solve the White House problem by making the validity of the debt unquestionable. In fact, it would make it explicitly questionable. And the question is, debt that exceeds the limit, is it valid or not? And I mean, it just raises all those legal issues. And, at a time when you're trying to calm the market and avoid panic and, in the midst of a default, I don't think it gets the job done.
Yeah, I think that's my concern with the 14th Amendment. I would differ with you in the sense that I think a good faith argument can be made that the debt limit can be applied in an unconstitutional manner. And I'd love to have an argument about that, except it doesn't solve the problem. It does create uncertainty. It does question the debt. And I think that's why presidents have not invoked it. I doubt that they're going to go that route. And, you can't get the Supreme Court to just issue a declaratory judgment on something like that. The president would have to actually try an auction, and then there would be a suit trying to block the auction of bonds over the debt ceiling. And I imagine the court would be pretty quick in how it would take it up. But to me, it points out the fundamental flaw of the debt ceiling in that it is not part of the budget process. It is an afterthought. Mm. So Congress has the authority to tax, and it has the authority to spend, and it has the authority to borrow. Mm-hmm. And so when it passes spending laws and tax laws and produces debt, arguably to me, that is debt authorized by law, because they are going to have to borrow to make good on the spending and tax policy they made. So the debt limit then comes along and says, and it's not part of the budget process. They don't consider the debt ceiling when they're passing these laws. It's just like, oh, we passed a bunch of laws that created huge debts. And oh, by the way, you can't pay in full for these legal obligations that we've made. And that gets into all the problems that we were talking about before, which is that you have legal obligations that won't be paid in full if you exceed the debt ceiling. And that's the argument for why you actually have sort of a conflict of laws here, and that you have the president is supposed to do what? Is he supposed to make good on the payments that Congress has authorized, or cut them arbitrarily because of the debt ceiling that Congress has authorized? It is a very schizophrenic procedure. The GAO, Government Accountability Office, has been pointing this out for years, that this makes absolutely no sense. Whether or not it's unconstitutional, I don't know, but it really doesn't make any sense.